Everyone, let me ask you something powerful right at the start. What's the voice in your head saying to you right now? Is it cheering you on or holding you back? Because here's the truth. The way you talk to yourself isn't just talk, it's a blueprint. It's the script you hand to the universe. And whether you know it or not, that inner dialogue is either building your dream life or silently destroying it. Today, I'm here to flip that script, to show you how to speak to yourself in a way that doesn't just motivate you, it aligns you with your goals. To speak with the kind of intention that doesn't just inspire, it manifests. This is not about positive thinking. This is about powerful reprogramming. This is about using your words, your inner words, as fuel, as frequency, and as force. So if you're ready to talk to yourself like a visionary, like a creator, like the version of you who already has it all, the words you speak to yourself in the quiet moments no one else hears are more than just thoughts. They are vibrations, they are signals, they are silent commands that set the tone for what your mind believes, what your heart accepts, and ultimately what your life begins to mirror. Most people underestimate the power of that inner voice. They think their thoughts are just private commentary, random background noise. But what if I told you that your inner voice is not just a reaction to your reality, but the very architect of it? Everything in the universe operates on frequency, sound, light, emotion, thought. Each has its own vibrational field. And you as a human being are a powerful transmitter. The thoughts you repeat, the emotions you dwell in, the self-talk you internalize, they all emit a frequency that aligns you with similar energy. Like attracts like. That's not just a catchy phrase from the self-help world. It's a principle of quantum physics and a truth echoed by ancient wisdom. Your inner dialogue is not neutral. It's either lifting you toward the reality you desire or anchoring you to the one you're trying to escape. And the difference lies in how you speak to yourself, especially when no one's watching. The universe is not responding to your wishes or your begging. It's responding to your frequency. And your frequency is being set by the words you say to yourself repeatedly. Think about how often we sabotage ourselves, not through action, but through belief. You might be taking steps, setting goals, even making progress, but if your inner voice is constantly whispering things like, I'm not good enough, this is too hard, or I'll never get there, then what you're really doing is training your subconscious to stay small. And your subconscious is always listening. It doesn't judge, it doesn't question, it just accepts and execute. Now, flip that. Imagine if instead you started speaking to yourself from the place of already having what you desire. Instead of saying, I hope I can, or maybe one day, you say, this is who I am, or this is already mine. That small shift changes everything. You're no longer speaking from lack. You're no longer reinforcing the absence of your goal. You're embodying the presence of it. And that embodiment, that frequency, creates alliance. This is not about delusion. It's not about pretending problems don't exist or lying to yourself. It's about choosing the frequency you want to live in. It's about aligning your internal state with the external reality you wish to create. Because reality doesn't just happen to us. We participate in its creation. Every word, every thought, every emotional habit is part of that process. When you speak as if it's already yours, something subtle but profound begins to happen inside you. Your brain starts to rewire itself. Neural pathways associated with doubt, fear, and limitation begin to weaken. Meanwhile, new pathways associated with confidence, clarity, and possibility begin to strengthen. This is the science of neuroplasticity in action. Your mind is always adapting to what it hears most consistently. So why not give it something powerful to work with? Consider how athletes use visualization and affirmations. The best performers in the world don't just train their bodies, they train their inner voice. Before a race, a match, or performance, they speak to themselves in a way that reinforces success. They say, I'm ready, I've done the work, I'm a champion. Not because they're arrogant, but because they understand that victory starts within. If their inner voice doesn't believe it, their body won't follow through. The same principle applies to anyone trying to achieve anything meaningful. You don't need to be an Olympic athlete to use this. You just need to recognize that every time you say, I can't, it's too late, or I don't have what it takes, you are placing bricks in the wall that separates you from your potential. And every time you say, I'm capable, I am becoming, or this is who I am, you're building a bridge toward your vision. Here's where most people get it wrong. They wait for evidence before changing their self-talk. They wait to see results before speaking confidently. But the truth is, the results won't come until the energy changes. And the energy won't change until the inner voice does. That's why you have to talk to yourself like it's already yours. Not because it's a trick, but because it's a trigger. It triggers belief. It triggers action. It triggers identity. When you talk to yourself like the person you want to be, you start making decisions that match that identity. If you speak like a leader, you start showing up like one. If you speak like someone who is financially abundant, you start taking actions that align with abundance. If you speak like someone who is confident and fulfilled, your energy changes and people notice. Opportunities begin to open, not because of magic, but because you've raised your frequency to match the life you want. The subconscious mind doesn't distinguish between reality and repetition. If it hears something enough, it accepts it as truth. That's why advertising works. That's why propaganda works. And that's why self-talk works. So why not use that power consciously? If every time you look in the mirror, you say, I'm tired, I'm stuck, or I'm not enough, you are wiring those beliefs deeper into your nervous system. But if every time you look in the mirror, you say, I am powerful, I am evolving, I am exactly where I need to be to grow, then your mind begins to believe it and, more importantly, begins to act on it. Think about the difference in energy between these two internal statements. I hope I can be successful versus I am creating success every day. The first is weak, uncertain, and disconnected. The second is grounded, intentional, and rooted in ownership. That shift in language leads to a shift in identity. And identity is the root of behavior. You can't outperform your self-emission, but you can rewrite it. This is why journaling, affirmations, visualization, and conscious self-talk are such powerful tools. Not because they magically change your life overnight, but because they help you speak to yourself differently. They help you install new mental programs that align with your desired outcomes. And once that new inner voice becomes your dominant voice, the outside world starts to shift. The key is consistency. One positive affirmation won't undo years of negative programming, but repetition creates reinforcement. Reinforcement creates belief, belief creates momentum, and momentum creates results. That's the sequence. It starts with what you're saying in your head, not just what you're doing with your hand. There will be days when it feels fake, days when the old voice creeps back in louder than ever. That's normal. It doesn't mean the new voice isn't working. It means the old one is dying. And just like any fading habit, it will try to survive. But you get to choose which voice you feed. You get to decide whether to return to the frequency of fear or step into the frequency of power. And don't underestimate the emotional charge behind your words. Speaking with conviction isn't just about what you say, it's about how you say it. When you speak to yourself with energy, passion, and certainty, you're not just repeating words. You're sending commands to your nervous system. You're activating your physiology. You're stirring your spirit. That energy is contagious, not just to others, but to your future self. The world reflects who you believe you are. So if you want to change your results, don't just change your actions. Change your internal narrative. Start speaking like the version of you who already has what you're working toward. That version doesn't beg. That version doesn't doubt. That version claims. That version moves with clarity and intention. You don't attract what you want, you attract what you are. And what you are is a reflection of what you repeatedly tell yourself you are. So if you want to manifest more, be more, and live more, start where all transformation begins, not in the world outside, but in the words within. Every thought you think and every word you speak becomes a thread in the fabric of your identity. You may not see it right away, but over time, the language you use to describe yourself, your life, your challenges, and your goals becomes a blueprint for your reality. Words are not just expressions of how we feel. They are the seeds of what we become. The mind listens carefully to the vocabulary you use, especially when you talk to yourself. That inner dialogue isn't harmless. It's foundational. It's the starting point of belief. And belief, in turn, is the engine behind every behavior you repeat, every decision you make, and every direction your life takes. When you repeatedly tell yourself things like, I'm not good at this, I never get things right, or I'm just not that kind of person, your brain accepts these phrases as commands. It doesn't argue. It doesn't fact check. It stores these phrases and builds patterns around them. That's the power of belief. It becomes an unconscious operating system that influences every action you take, whether you're aware of it or not. Let's break it down simply. Words lead to belief. Belief leads to behavior, and behavior leads to outcomes. So if you want to change your outcomes, if you want to perform better, achieve more, feel more fulfilled, it doesn't start with massive external changes. It starts with the simple, consistent act of talking to yourself like someone who is built to win. Think about the people who perform at the highest levels: athletes, leaders, artists, entrepreneurs. What sets them apart isn't just skill or intelligence, it's the way they speak to themselves when it matters most. In the moments of fear, stress, pressure, or doubt, they don't crumble under the weight of negative inner chatter. They talk to themselves in a way that reminds them who they are. I've got this. I've trained for this. I always figure it out. Those are not just motivational phrases. They are mental armor. They are belief reinforcing statements that trigger confident behavior. Compare that to someone who's constantly telling themselves, I'm probably going to mess this up, or people like me don't succeed. Even if they have the same talent or intelligence, the behavior that flows from that belief system will be cautious, hesitant, and inconsistent. And that behavior reinforces the very belief they started with. It becomes a loop, a feedback cycle, a self-fulfilling prophecy. So much of what holds people back isn't their environment or their circumstances. It's their inner narrative, the script they've been repeating in their mind for years. Sometimes that script was written by someone else, a parent, a teacher, a friend, or even a painful experience. But now it's yours, and unless you consciously rewrite it, it becomes your truth. That's why awareness is key. You have to start noticing what you're saying to yourself, especially when things get hard, because that's the moment where belief either strengthens or breaks. Language is not passive. It programs the subconscious mind, and the subconscious mind drives 95% of your behavior. If you talk to yourself like someone who constantly loses, doubts, or struggles, you will find ways to act accordingly. But when you speak to yourself like a winner, even when you don't feel like one, you plant the seeds of a new belief, a new identity, and that identity starts to demand new behavior. It doesn't happen overnight. You can't undo years of self-doubt with a single affirmation, but you can start to shift the momentum every time you say, I can handle this instead of this is too much. You are creating a new possibility. Every time you say, I'm learning instead of I'm failing, you're training your brain to look for growth instead of defeat. And over time, that small shift in language becomes a massive shift in belief, which leads to bold, empowered, and intentional behavior. Behavior is the bridge between belief and results. It's not enough to believe you can succeed. You have to act on it. But that action feels almost impossible when you're carrying around beliefs that contradict your goals. That's why changing your words matters so much. It's the foundation. You cannot build a life of success on a foundation of self-sabotaging speech. Let's take an example. Say you want to start a new business. If your inner voice is saying things like, I'm not smart enough, or I'll probably fail, or I don't know what I'm doing, your actions will be small and uncertain. You'll procrastinate. You'll second guess every move. And eventually you might quit, not because you couldn't succeed, but because your belief system didn't support the behavior required to succeed. But if you shift your inner voice to say, I'm resourceful, I can figure this out, every expert was once a beginner, then suddenly you take risks, you stay consistent, you learn quickly, and those behaviors drive progress. It's easy to underestimate how much your self-talk influences your energy, focus, and resilience, but consider this. When you say something empowering to yourself, like I've got what it takes, you don't just think differently, you breathe differently. Your posture changes, your decisions become clearer, you take action with more certainty. That's not an accident. That's the body responding to belief. And belief, once again, started with words. Even your emotional state is influenced by the words you choose. If you describe a situation as a disaster, your mind and body respond with stress and panic. If you describe the same situation as a challenge, your response becomes more solution-oriented. That's not just semantics, that's psychology. Words assign meaning, and meaning shapes how we feel and how we act. Talking to yourself like someone who wins doesn't mean you ignore your flaws or pretend to be perfect. It means you choose a narrative that empowers growth instead of shame. Winners aren't people who never fail. They're people who know how to speak to themselves in a way that turns setbacks into comebacks. They use language that builds resilience, not regret. And that language fuels belief, which fuels behavior. It's not always about saying something grand or motivational. Sometimes it's as simple as choosing words that reinforce strength rather than weakness. Instead of, I can't handle this, try, I'm doing my best with what I've got. Instead of, this always happens to me, say, this is a chance to respond differently. Those aren't just phrases, they're belief builders. And belief builders shape your identity, who you think you are and what you think you're capable of. Identity is the most powerful driver of behavior. If you believe you're lazy, you'll act lazy. If you believe you're not creative, you won't even try. But if you start saying, I'm disciplined or I'm learning to be creative, your brain starts looking for ways to match that identity. Your behavior shifts to stay consistent with your belief. That's how change happens. Internally first, then externally. We've all seen people try to change their lives by changing their habits, their routines, or their environments, and sometimes that works for a while. But if the inner voice doesn't change, the old patterns return, because behavior that isn't backed by belief is fragile. It cracks under pressure. But when belief is strong, behavior becomes natural, it becomes aligned. And that kind of alignment is powerful. It creates flow, momentum, transfer. So if you want to change your life, start with your words. Start with how you speak to yourself when no one's around. Start with the phrases you repeat when you're tired, scared, or doubting yourself. Those are the moments that define your future, not because of what's happening on the outside, but because of what you're saying on the inside. You already have the ability to shift your inner narrative. You don't need permission. You don't need proof. You just need to practice. Talk to yourself like someone who wins. Not because you've won everything yet, but because winners are made in the way they think, speak, and show up. Speak from vision, not from circumstance. Speak from who you're becoming, not just who you've been. And the more you do it, the more natural it becomes. At first, it might feel awkward. You might not believe the words you're saying. That's okay. Speak them anyway. Belief doesn't always precede language. Sometimes language creates belief. Say it until you feel it. Say it until your behavior rises to meet it. Say it until your world reflects it. Because that's what winners do. Not just when they're winning, but especially when they're not. They choose their words with intention. They speak with power. They build beliefs that support the life they want. And those beliefs drive them forward, one action at a time. The way you talk to yourself shapes who you are. Your internal dialogue is not just a passing thought or a fleeting moment of self-reflection. It's the very foundation of your identity. The words you use when no one is around are what form the picture of who you believe yourself to be. And this belief becomes the lens through which you view the world. The truth is, everything you experience, every choice you make, and every outcome you manifest is a direct result of the identity you hold within yourself. And it all starts with the voice inside your head. Self-talk is a powerful tool that shapes the way we see ourselves, our capabilities, and our potential. Every time you speak to yourself, you are reinforcing certain beliefs about who you are and what you can achieve. These beliefs, whether positive or negative, create an internal narrative that governs your actions. And actions, as we know, lead to results. If you speak to yourself as someone who is incapable or undeserving, your behavior will follow suit and the results will reflect that. On the other hand, if you speak to yourself like someone who is capable, worthy, and powerful, you begin to take actions aligned with that self-image. And as a result, you begin to manifest the life you desire. Your identity isn't something fixed or predetermined. It's something you can consciously create and recreate through consistent self-talk. This is why your words have such immense power. You don't have to wait for external validation or circumstances to change in order to manifest a new reality. It all begins within. The most transformative change occurs when you start to redefine who you are, and that process starts with the way you talk to yourself. Every time you speak to yourself, you are planting seeds of possibility. The more you repeat certain phrases or affirmations, the more your brain starts to accept them as truths. This is because the subconscious mind is incredibly malleable and highly responsive to repetition. It doesn't distinguish between what's real and what's imagined. It simply accepts whatever you feed it. So if you continuously tell yourself that you are successful, capable, and deserving, your subconscious mind begins to align with that belief. It then influences your behavior, your decision-making, and your actions, all of which bring you closer to manifesting the life you envision. It's easy to fall into the trap of thinking that the circumstances around you need to change first before you can change your life. But the reality is, transformation starts from the inside out. When you start to consistently speak to yourself as someone who is already living the life you want, you begin to shift your identity to match that vision. And this shift in identity doesn't happen overnight. It's a gradual process of rewiring your brain. But with consistent practice, it will eventually feel like second nature. The first step in this process is awareness. You have to become aware of the way you're currently speaking to yourself. Are you constantly criticizing yourself? Are you reinforcing beliefs of inadequacy or failure? Or are you encouraging yourself, speaking with love and affirming your worthiness and potential? This awareness is crucial because you can't change something that you're not conscious of. Once you recognize the negative or limiting beliefs that have been shaping your reality, you can begin to replace them with new empowering beliefs that align with your desired future. This is where the magic of self-talk begins. It's not just about saying positive affirmations mindlessly. It's about shifting your inner dialogue to reflect the identity you want to create. For example, instead of saying, "I can't do this," you could say, "I am capable of overcoming any challenge that comes my way." Instead of "I'm not good enough," try "I am worthy of all the success and abundance the world has to offer." These aren't just empty words. They're declarations of who you are and who you are becoming. By consistently speaking this way to yourself, you are building a new identity, one that is aligned with your dreams and goals. It's important to understand that identity is not just a concept. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. What you believe about yourself dictates how you show up in the world. If you see yourself as someone who is not capable of achieving their dreams, your behavior will reflect that belief. You may procrastinate, avoid taking risks, or sabotage your own success. But when you start speaking to yourself as someone who is confident, empowered, and deserving of success, you begin to take actions that align with that identity. You start showing up with more confidence, more determination, and a greater willingness to take risks. And that's when the magic happens, when your behavior begins to shift in alignment with your new self-image. This process of manifestation doesn't require you to have everything figured out right away. It's not about knowing every step you need to take to achieve your goals. It's about showing up consistently as the person who is already on the path to achieving those goals. The actions will follow the beliefs, and over time, those actions will lead to results. It's a process of becoming, not a destination to reach. One of the most powerful aspects of consistent self-talk is that it also helps you navigate challenges and setbacks. No matter how committed you are to your goals, you will face obstacles along the way. There will be times when things don't go as planned, when you feel defeated, or when you question your ability to succeed. But in those moments, your self-talk becomes your anchor. If you've been consistently speaking to yourself like someone who is resilient, strong, and determined, those beliefs will help you bounce back from adversity. You will be able to navigate difficulties with a sense of empowerment, knowing that setbacks are just temporary and that you are capable of overcoming them.